Hello and welcome to another edition of our Steelers Depot Q&A live stream here on this Monday, May 13th, one day after the Pittsburgh Steelers rookie minicamp has wrapped up. I am Alex Kozora. Joining me as always is Dave Bryan of SteelersDepot.com. Dave, how you doing? Thanks for being here.
I'm still showing a waiting for Alex Kozora. There it goes.
Nope. We good?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it started. I got a little bit of a delay there.
Okay.
I am doing well on this Monday before the schedule drop. So, and obviously coming out of the Steelers rookie minicamp this past weekend, should be interesting to see the line of questions from the group today.
Let me just check the chat here. You guys got me and Dave. It should be okay. It looks like we're live, but I just want to double check before we dive in and answer your Steelers questions for the next hour until 8 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you guys for being here. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel, mine and also the Steelers Depot channel, and check out the site you just saw on screen, SteelersDepot.com. Chat says we're good, and so we will get started here with our first question. It comes from Lumberzack94. Says, hey fellas, got a harder one today. If you guys had your way, would you prefer 66, that's Mason McCormick, as the future left guard or right guard? I'm trying to take everything into account in terms of Seahawks' age and James Daniels' contract expiring. He says the way he sees it, Daniels is a lot younger, and that's attractive for a young line. He can see McCormick filling in at left guard in 2026 when Seahawks' contract expires. What say you guys? Dave, what are your thoughts on McCormick left or right guard?
I have no preference on that. I want to see maybe if he can be the next man up over Herbig, maybe. Mm-hmm. That's my initial thought on that. Look, obviously you spend a fourth round draft pick on him. You expect him to make the team, and then obviously see where it goes from there. It'd be interesting to see the path to take the rest of this offseason. Maybe Daniels is one of those outliers that could potentially. This team has cash to spend right now, and I think we've established that. Whether or not they're going to spend another, $13-15 million in cash this season, or maybe next season. Obviously, you've got cash restrictions or cash plateaus that you have to hit over a 3-year span. So it's hard with this being year one to put it in writing that they're going to spend X amount this year. But I mean that's obviously one player that it's fathomable that they might go that direction with him. So we'll have to see how that plays out with him the rest of this offseason, with him obviously entering the final year of his contract, and with him still being fairly young, and obviously Seumalo being a little bit older there. My main concern right now with McCormick is let's see how he does the rest of this offseason, and let's see if he can maybe he can make a guy like Herbig expendable or something along those lines. So that's where my mind is right now. I will take it though, and I told Alex this on the podcast this morning. It's a nice takeaway that as much left guard as McCormick played in college, that they're going to give him some work on the right side. So obviously you want a guy like that to potentially be able to fill in both spots. But that's where my head is at with him, more so than thinking past this season right now.
Sure, I'm with you, Dave. I haven't thought about that far down the road next year, 2026. It may be whatever is needed based on how Daniels and Seumalo play this year and contract demands. The guard market did heat up pretty significantly this year. You saw guys like I think Robert Hunt get paid. Obviously, Kevin Dotson, former Steeler, get paid. Others. So we'll see in terms of what Daniels' cost might be and just overall performance. But for McCormick, it's just coming in, getting acclimated to the system. I think there'll be some adjustments he'll have to make. And then, as you said, kind of getting those additional reps at right guard to make himself more versatile after playing almost exclusively left guard at South Dakota State. So just kind of focused on his first camp, and we'll take it from there. Wanted to say a quick hello to some of those who have chimed in, and thank you to everybody who's been here right now. Russ Obenstein, Mike Y says, made it for the first time. Thank you, Mike. Glad you're here. Steel Pastor is here as well, and Double HH says happy solar flare day. Did you see the lights? Did you get the lights out in Vegas this weekend, Dave?
I didn't even know that was happening
No.
until after the fact, to be honest with you. I saw all those cool pictures and I didn't even think to check on that. No, I didn't. I see this from Jared in here, loved hearing the icy stories on the Friday show. Said they can't get enough of tales from Dave's youth. Look, we could. I don't know. Scott Brown tells me I got to write a book about all that one day, but I had to put it in fiction. It had to be classified as fiction because I don't think a lot of people would believe half of them there. So I'm on year 10 of the 9 lives at this point.
There you go. I want to mention 2 quick things here. Pittsburgh making a roster move on Monday after signing veteran cornerback Anthony Averett on Sunday. They waived offensive lineman Kellen Diesch today. He had signed a futures contract earlier this year, spent the 2023 season on Pittsburgh's practice squad, not a waived injured, so we presume he's healthy. Not entirely sure what happened there. He was in rookie minicamp as a first-year player. I assume did not look good, and that's why he got the heave-ho. And Brett Gambita just had a quick comment I want to shout out. Says, hey, man, just wanted to say thanks for crediting me with the Payton Wilson jersey number news break. I know he was the first, I think, to announce that before the team account or that Twitter account that reports jersey numbers did, and so we gave him credit there, and good scoop there, Brett. So thank you for chiming in, saying hello. All right, back to the questions here. More of a comment, but Mike Adesso says, Alex, now you're just doing your job, and very well, I might add, but your story and talk on the podcast today on negatives of rookies took all the good vibes from the draft and kicked me right in the, how do you say that? That's from Semi-Pro. I don't know, right in the gut, we'll say. I forget how to.
The jejunum.
Yes, is that how you say it? I was going to butcher the pronunciation there. But yeah, Mike, just wanted to give the other side of the downside to some of the rookies. I'm happy with the class overall. I know that's not the most exciting and encouraging thing to hear about. Negatives with rookies, but we'd spend so much time, rightfully, understandably so, looking at the positives, just to flip the coin for a moment, a couple weeks post-draft, to talk about what these guys have to work on, because we'll be watching for those things come camp. John Pennington says, hello, Dave and Alex. Do you think everyone is putting too much into where the rookies were lining up this early in the process? Dave, what do you think? Are we putting too much stock into where these guys are aligning?
I think you take it for what it is. It's the first weekend of rookie minicamp, and look, I mean, we were all kind of wondering what, look, the larger storyline here is getting to week 1 and seeing who is where. And obviously with Fautano spending most of his college career at left tackle, and obviously with most of probably everybody in this chat tonight hoping that maybe Broderick Jones gets over to the left side, that's where the focus is. I mean, it's football in shorts, and Mike Tomlin, if Mike Tomlin was listening to this right now, he says, yes, you guys are putting too much onus on where people are lining up. So the short answer is, are we putting too much onus on that? Maybe, but the short view answer is
the shorter version of the answer.
That's the only thing really to talk about coming out of that thing, and to what degree it's a storyline, we'll see. But to me, that's the big takeaway coming out of there right now. And
for something like rookie minicamp, to me, it is really the only storyline there is, because you're in a padless practice. It's a bunch of rookies. You're just getting a feel. The players getting a feel for the coaches and vice versa. It's hard to evaluate. You can make some broad, maybe sweeping generalizations about these guys, but I want to get a starting point on where these guys are aligning. And sure, John, you're right. These guys, where they align today, may not be where they're aligning midway through OTAs and training camp. Injuries will impact things, of course, but just to get a lay of the land as a starting point, I think that's important for me. At least it's objective. Okay, this is where this guy is aligning. Fautanu at right tackle, McCormick at right guard, Roman Wilson working inside out. It's a good just foundation point for myself.
Yeah, look, I think you made a good point. You just don't want to draw any long, hard conclusions of what happens in early May here. But in the same point, I think it's important to draw lines in the sand, kind of mile markers along the road here as we go, and what's the next line in the sand? That would be OTAs. What happens there? What happens when they get into the early part of training camp and all like that? So it's a talking point because it's a talking point. So it's the most relevant thing I think to come out of there, and we file that away. We discuss it and be careful not to draw any long, hard conclusions of it, and then move along to the next phase, which is the start of OTAs.
Well said. Want to answer a quick question from Russ, who says, Alex, are you going to Latrobe? I think I am. Yep, I will be out there for training camp, as I have been for the last decade now. I guess it's been, time flies. So I will be out there again, and hopefully I will see you, Russ.
I'm gonna get you that Steelers onesie kind of jumper, and you can wear that out there for
perfect
for training camp.
Sweat to death, indeed. Double HH with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Double HH, for always being here in these live streams, and you've been a frequent super chat donator. Says, what is more likely? Do we get our wide receiver 2 or cornerback 2 during summer camp cut down? That's a can of worms about potential receiver trades, and can Pittsburgh make one materialize? Cornerback 2 is an outside corner. I think it's less likely they have Deontae Johnson. I think that's going to be their guy. If you're talking, slot corner, that would maybe be more plausible. There's still not a lot there right now. There's Beanie Bishop. There's Averett, who's been primarily an outside guy. I think they will try to use him in the slot some. So it's really just to be determined on a bunch of variables.
Boy, I can envision the headline on Steelers Depot now: the summer of Suttons. Look, hopefully a lot of you listened to the interview we had with a couple of beat writers the other day on the podcast, and I don't know if you saw Chris Thomason's report today that Ross McCormick wrote up, but I mean, you've got another beat writer from Denver, another one though who I hold in high regard as well too, Mike Kliss. I think Mike Kliss does a fantastic job. Longtime beat writer Chris Thomason, I think he does a great job. He previously covered the Vikings, and I think started covering the Broncos last season here. I mean, you got two really reputable beat writers, each kind of on the opposite side of the fence here when it comes to Courtland Sutton. Kliss, I think, is pretty convinced that the Broncos are not going to trade Sutton, and I think Chris Thomason is open to the possibility of that happening. Which way that goes, I mean, June 1st is right around the corner, and if they were going to do something, it might make sense to do it not long after that. I don't think Sutton is participating in now it is voluntary. There's no, he's not going to get in trouble for not participating in it, but understanding is he's not participating with the team during any of these early phases of the offseason program, and we'll see how that goes. And then, about the slot, I mean, most of you have heard the rumblings already about, what maybe something will happen with Cameron Sutton, and that's obviously yet to be determined there. Long story short, it feels like this team could use additions to both the wide receiver room and the slot cornerback position. So, once again, it's hard to draw any hard conclusions as we sit here in May, but it is, to me, something to at least think and possibly watch what happens moving forward here.
You're right. If I had to answer that, if we're talking outside corner versus outside receiver, I would say outside receiver. But if we're talking slot corner versus outside receiver, I'll say slot corner. I just don't know. I know veterans get cut, and there'll be some names out there inevitably late August, but are you going to go get your every down number 2 outside receiver from that cut down pile? It's just harder to find that guy. I think a slot option is more realistic to find that type that may get squeezed out somewhere. So that'd be my guess. But again, we're just kind of standing by right now.
And here's the thing, and we have documented this several times over the years, and we'll probably write about it again this offseason. The Steelers have a history of players not being under contract by the time OTAs end, that wind up not only under contract, but on the 53-man roster come week 1. And I like the chances of you going against history to say I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think one or two players not currently under contract with this team by the time OTAs end or as OTAs maybe start wind up on the 53-man roster. So it's not hard to point at maybe a couple of those positions where we could see that happen at, right?
Absolutely. I would expect there to be some new receiver or corner added from this point forward, or maybe even from, training camp forward. They, have brought in guys through trades and waiver claims and signings before the start of the season. Historically, it happens almost every year. I think it will happen again. All right, next question comes from Jonathan Stevens. Herbig should be edge 3 in 2024, but are we sure we want him seeing 80 to 90% of the snaps if TJ or Highsmith gets hurt? He seems more like a NASCAR package rusher a la Bryce Huff. I would re-sign Golden. Josh Carney wrote about that this morning or this afternoon about, re-signing, the potential and consideration of re-signing Marcus Golden after this team had some interest, at least in Bud Dupree, who signed a 2-year deal with the Chargers. I get the point. I know I'm just not going to knock Herbig on his size because I did that after the draft last year. I thought he should go off ball. He proved me wrong. He played well. Yes, it was in limited snaps and over, a larger number of snaps, bigger volume. You're going to get some diminishing returns, but I think he played the run well. I think he certainly showed the burst and traits as a pass rusher. Your depth can only be so good. So I am generally comfortable with the outside linebacker room in Pittsburgh right now.
Let me tell you, Herbig absolutely exceeded my expectations in his rookie season, especially when it came to what he was asked to do. I don't think you could have asked for any more than what he gave this team, both as a pass rusher and as a run defender. Albeit limited snaps and all like that. But I mean, he exceeded expectations. Now, obviously, whatever the second year jump looked like. Look, you get exceptions to the rule. And who was the Chargers and edge defender that the Steelers flirted with, ended up in Baltimore, then even re-signed another short arm guy that we talked about. I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, this offseason this occurred?
Yeah, no, last season. It was with the Chargers, the edge rusher, and then ended up with Baltimore. Oh, I'm drawing a blank.
I'm
Somebody
sure the
help me out.
Can tell us.
And he just
was he coming in for a visit?
Oh, no, you'll know him as soon as I say it. I'm brain farting here.
Chargers edge rusher. Oh, I'm sure I'll know
hold
what
on,
you say.
I'm pulling it up. Yeah.
Kyle Van Noy, was that it?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Chipping in.
You get exceptions to these rules where you get these short arm guys that, end up being able to hold their own on the edge. And Herbig so far is following that path there. So if he takes this next step in his development, and there's no reason to think he won't, he should be able to be that number 3 guy.
I think, honestly, the question is, you get into camp, how does a guy like Jeremiah Moon develop? I think he's a pretty raw guy, good special teamer. That's what he did in Baltimore when he was up last year, but there's going to need to be a step taken as a pass rusher. If he's not showing a lot of confidence, do you consider insulating yourself? Because if, a starter went down and then Herbig comes in, I'm okay with Herbig, but then how much confidence do you have in Moon being a number 3 rotational guy? That may be the consideration, I think, honestly, more so than Herbig's evaluation and situation.
And look, at some point, they'll need a 4th guy out there on the field.
Yeah, Moon will play a little bit.
In that room. And you hope Moon can be that guy, and they'll get a good sense of who he is and what he can do, moving on forward through OTAs and obviously through training camp and all like that. If you do go out and get a guy like Golden, obviously you're not going to get the special teams aspect from him, but you get a guy that can, play anywhere from 200 to 400 snaps for you if you needed them.
Right. So, but we'll get in the camp with this younger group in terms of the backups. Evaluate that. If they brought in Golden again, I'd be fine with that. I think it's possible given his link and close ties with Denzel Martin. He played fine last year. Lack of special teams value hurt some of those snaps if he's the number 4 outside linebacker and playing 6 snaps per game on defense and essentially 0 on special teams. You're kind of running one short in terms of your game day roster, it feels like. So, could he I don't know, go to the practice squad. That's kind of pushing it. But you get into camp, I think, see how a guy like Moon looks and go from there. All right, next question will come from Steel Pastor. Hey, Dave and Alex, are we really going to run with Ogunjobi again? They are. I mean, they've shown no signs of going any other way. They've paid him. He's going to be a starter. Needs to be more productive. Obviously, I think he's just a very inconsistent guy that was generally healthy last year. Injuries have been his issue 2 years ago, not practicing and just kind of dealing with that foot or whatever it was. But yeah, Ogunjobi and Haywood will be your starters in nickel packages.
Yeah, you'd like to see more of that guy that was with the Raiders a couple years ago before he had that injury, right?
For sure. That one really strong year. Then he got hurt with the foot and battled that. But again, last year, I mean, I don't know what he dealt with, but he wasn't on the injury report as much. He didn't miss as much practice time. There were some really impressive moments. There were some flashes, but just too often he just was not. He would go middle of the season. He was super quiet when they needed him, when Hayward was down, and it just wasn't a lot from him. All right, let's see what else we have here. K. Cabrera. Haven't checked in since the draft. What are the main headlines so far? I mean, really,
not the Raiders, the Bengals. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
No. The Browns. That was the end of that. Before he, when was the season?
He was with. That was with. I don't know. I'd have to check. I don't think it was with the Browns.
Because
he got hurt in the playoffs.
I must be thinking. It was a game against the Raiders that he got hurt. That's right.
As a Bengal.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. K. Cabrera, haven't checked in since the draft. What are the main headlines so far? I mean, post-draft, it's been the rookie minicamp, the signing of Anthony Averett. There's not really probably been one big storyline. It's been a lot of questions about, okay, wide receiver, will they continue to add? Will they look to add? That's been one. Many of the draft picks have signed. The only two that have not signed right now are Zach Frazier and Troy Fautanu, so that's kind of another storyline as well.
Yeah, and the thing, look, they'll get all these guys obviously signed before training camp there, and I wrote about Frazier today, just wondering about that third year. He's kind of in that spot, kind of close to where Benton was last year, because Benton ended up being the cutoff point for second-round players that had any portion of their third year guaranteed. Now, it was only a very, very small percentage, but he ended up being Keanu Benton ended up being the cutoff of last year's draft class, of those draft picks that got any third year guarantee. So every year you see agents trying to push that line out, and obviously with Frazier being 51 this year, it'd be interesting to watch what happens around him. So in other words, look, this thing could happen. They could get on here and announce the deal right where we're doing this live stream. I kind of doubt that will happen, but obviously it could happen at any time. But what I'm getting at is, don't be surprised if Frazier signing kind of strings out a little bit here as he waits to see the guys that sign around him and how much guarantee of that third year he gets.
Some of the second-round picks signed today, I think not super close to Frazier. I think Renardo Green, who was in the 60s, signed. So some of those are picking up, but you're right. I think Frazier could be the last one to sign, the way that Joey Porter Jr. was the last one to sign, although I don't think Frazier's situation is as complex as Porter became last year.
No.
Next question, just a comment here. You mentioned it earlier, Dave, but just to go back to it, Jared with some nice comments, says, best Steelers coverage around, hands down, passion, and doing it for the right reasons. Thanks. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate your kind words, and glad you like listening to Dave's youth. Jax Flex says, is Muth an automatic extension? I think you feel pretty confident, probably a bit more than me, in terms of extension with Pat Freiermuth.
I've learned never to speak in absolutes over the years with this thing, but I'm as close to thinking that that's nearly a slam dunk, more so obviously than not. I will be surprised if they don't sign Freiermuth to an extension at some point between now and week 1, assuming he stays healthy and all. They've got the cash to do it. If they don't do it, where's that? Because I've got $13 million in additional cash set aside in my projections to be spent on him above and beyond what he's already on the books for this year. And obviously that, that additional cash would come in the form of a signing bonus thereabouts that money there. So, and then, if that doesn't happen, and then there's already another additional kind of what I think 13 million sitting around out there for this team to maybe spend. You're talking about, underspending around $26 million in cash. Now, there's no rule that says they can't underspend like that, but it would put a lot of onus on this team next season and the final season to where they're going to spend cash at to get to the 90% of the 3-year total of the cap total. So I'm expecting it to happen with Freiermuth. Now, is it guaranteed to happen? No, but I put it to you this way. I'll be surprised if an extension for Freiermuth does not happen this offseason.
Okay. It certainly could. It would not surprise me if it did. Had he had a healthy and third season, just like the first two, catching 60 passes for 800 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns, I would be with you 100%. But, could he say I didn't have a great year? Will that hurt my market a little bit? Can I have a, better year in this Arthur Smith system that should involve the tight ends quite a bit with better quarterback play, good health, and then really cash in next year? That's my only concern and hang up from his standpoint. Will the team want to wait and see and feel things out as well? Just quickly, if a deal does get done from an average yearly value perspective, what are we talking about in terms of what that cost, that number will be?
Let's look at the top 10 tight ends right now.
Because last year some tight ends got paid. It was Komet, Hawkinson.
I would think somewhere at least around $12 million average yearly value. That's where Dalton Schultz is now. Cole Komet signed last offseason, right, at 12.5. Njoku's at 13.68. He's the next one up the ladder. If he came in under Schultz at 12 million new money average, I think it goes without saying he would easily slot in between where Noah Fant is next on the list at 10.5. So if he came in under 12, it would probably be somewhere between 10.6 and 11.9. But I'm kind of betting him coming in around anywhere between 12 and 14 per.
That sounds right. He should get more than Komet with the way the cap went up. If they are going to extend him, if they're going to offer less than Komet, if I'm Freiermuth, I sit there and say I'll play the year out and just hopefully have a good season and then, compel a larger number for 2025. So we'll see on that. It's certainly the most likely name to be extended, excluding Cam Hayward's situation, which is just kind of doing to more reduced cap charges and those types of things in terms of the true and blue extension for a younger guy. Freiermuth would be the leader in that clubhouse.
Now, I think he would be shooting way too far for the moon if he thinks he's going to top a guy. Even Mark Andrews, surprisingly, is 6th overall at 14 million per. And then obviously you go up from there. Obviously his demands could play a part in whether or not he gets a deal. But I would think he'd be smart and think that he's not going to top even Mark Andrews at 14 million. So that's why I say somewhere probably in between 12 and 14 sounds about right for him.
Yeah, that does. Appreciate you guys being here. About a half hour left. If you guys could like to stream, would really appreciate that. Get as many of Steelers Nation into the chat here for the back half of our live stream. Steel Pastor says week 1, Denver, Monday night. It certainly makes a lot of sense to be in Denver in terms of dates and times. That's a lot harder to guess. It could also be, they will probably be on the road unless it is a primetime game because the Pirates are at home during the NFL opening weekend. So that usually pushes Pittsburgh to a road game. So that gives you at Denver, at Atlanta, Arthur Smith facing his former team. That could be a storyline as well. At Washington, less likely, but also a possibility, obviously. But Dave, we've kind of been able to narrow down the field of potential options with the NFL announcing a slate of week 1 games that impact Pittsburgh. You got the Ravens and Chiefs to open the year, Eagles, Packers in Brazil, and then also just announced the Cowboys and Browns will play Sunday afternoon. So those are all week 1 opponents that are off the board for Pittsburgh.
Narrowed it down to 9. Is that a saying? I mean, but look, it's obviously fewer than what it started out at. You've seen those clips before that they talk about setting the schedule and how,
It's all computer now, right?
Yeah, right. AWS and
right.
the cloud all does that at the kind of the push of the button. I guess my main question is when was that final button actually pushed, and how much do quote unquote kind of storylines do they try to implement into that thing? I mean, obviously, look, you want the Super Bowl champion on that first Thursday night game, and
sure.
that's an obvious one. Was that final button pushed after Russell Wilson signed?
I think so.
I would assume that it would be, being that it's happened so many weeks ago and all like that. I just wonder how much, how hard they tried to get some of those storylines into the computer, accepting, the best outcome league wide. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. It's a good question. I don't know. There's probably some sort of input to do that. But when they used to do it by hand, basically you had the knowledge of the storylines. I don't know how well you can implement storylines, or can you just sit there and, run scenarios of, if you make Pittsburgh and Denver week 1, how does the rest of the schedule play out? I'm sure there's ways you can do that. But I don't know when they start that process. It does take some time, but not nearly the amount of time that it used to take, manually, essentially. I have to think that the schedule was not pieced together until post free agency.
And it's just speculation, but the Pirates being in town that weekend has most people thinking that they'll be back on the road week 1. I mean, it's just speculation is all that is. And if that's the case, I think you narrowed it down to potentially six teams, right?
Right. If they are going to be on the road, which they have been every year since 2014, except for last year when they were at home, but the Pirates were on the road that weekend. So we'll see. Get our answers here soon enough.
I hope it's Denver, because it's such an easy storyline to go, either that or Atlanta. I mean, it's two easy build-ups there if that ends up being the case. But we'll definitely find out by Wednesday night.
Would love to see the Chargers come to Pittsburgh week 1. Maybe for a primetime game would be, I think, a really fun game to open up the season. David Leach, what would be the reason the Seahawks would trade DK Metcalf? Dave, you talked about this a lot. What would be their compelling reason to deal him?
I've been asked a lot about this since writing about it a couple of times, and I don't have a great answer for that. I mean, I really don't, other than, just maybe the franchise wanting to move in a little bit different direction, but the cap being in play. But look, as I've said a lot of times when talking about the cap can, depending on how bad you want to work around a cap situation, they generally always can be worked around, whether or not you want to use void years and some restructures, what have you. Now, if you look at them at a core, and look, they had some more. I think a couple of beat writers wrote about this or tweeted about this today for Seattle. They've come to terms with a few more of their draft picks and their undrafted guys, and I don't think they have the cap room to accommodate all that right now. So we might, in 24 hours, their whole cap situation could change. Now, if you look at it at its core on over the cap, there's not really many great restructure candidates that they have right now. Now, with that said, DK Metcalf is one of those potential restructure candidates. And if they just do a typical restructure with no void years or something added to it, I think they save nearly $6 million on that. If they push that button and restructure DK in before June 1st, you can forget about him. That'll be out. But it does the tinfoil hat wearing Dave is kind of wondering why they haven't pushed that button yet, on the restructure. But outside of that, I don't have a great reason why they would trade a guy like that right now.
The only one you could come up with, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it is a new coaching staff. It's a new head coach. It's a new OC. It's a new group. And if for some reason, and I don't know what that would be, and there's no evidence this is the case, but if for some reason they did not view Metcalf as a good fit for their system, their scheme, that would open the door to a trade, but unlikely to occur. We'll see, though, because you've said, Dave, that basically there's one or two players they could restructure. Draymond Jones, a D tackle, or DK Metcalf. And if they're going to make a move, then I assume one of those guys will have their deal reworked here by Wednesday.
I think they could also go after Geno, but I mean, is that something they'd really want to do at this stage? Let me.
You're not sure if he's the long-term option, and there was some discussion: would he be kept around this year? I mean,
right.
I guess they could, but when we talked to Greg Bell on Friday, he said Jones and Metcalf were the two names to note, and you've mentioned that as well.
Right. Looking at it, and these are typical restructures with no void years and all. This is just as contracts sit right now. I mean, you look at the list here, and it's Geno Smith. They can free up $5.845 million with a restructure on him. DK Metcalf, they could free up $5.9375 million on him. Draymond Jones, $4.9375 if they restructured him. Now, here's the thing that we don't know, because obviously we don't follow the Seahawks intimately here. But is there anybody at risk of maybe getting cut here? Is there an extension candidate that would lower that person's cap charge and free up some money that way? Those kind of things are so hard to answer when you don't follow a team like that. But I mean, if you're looking at restructure candidates alone, and if you consider Geno Smith not to be one, that leaves you with DK Metcalf and Draymond Jones. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, once again, I'm a cap nerd. I like watching. You remember the thing that the Saints went through a couple of years ago, having to navigate through all those restructures coming out of the COVID. I find that stuff fascinating, and I'm finding it fascinating to watch the Seahawks kind of work around their cap situation here, because I mean, we all know they've got more expenditures coming down the road with $4 million going to practice squad. You're going to need a 52nd, 53rd player. How many players are going to be on IR that they have to accommodate come week one? So they've got their work cut out for them. But I mean, all this is to say that I don't have a great reason of why they would trade DK Metcalf, and I think that's the common answer that you're going to get out of anybody with any sort of knowledge who follows that side of the fence there.
Right. So we'll keep you posted. We'll see what their next moves are. Brandon asks, who impressed the most in rookie camp? Any huge standouts? To be clear, we were not in attendance rookie minicamp. We won't be for OTAs. We will be for training camp like we are for every year. But even in terms of impressed and evaluation, it's so hard to make that judgment when you're talking about just basic install stuff, rookies, new guys. Again, everyone trying to learn about each other, just get the basics of an NFL practice down, take the new coaching, that kind of stuff. So that's what we care more about, kind of where guys are aligning and how they're starting their careers positionally, as opposed to the evaluation aspect. Everett, obviously, or Averett, I should say, impressed enough to catch a roster spot. But from an evaluation standpoint, you don't hear a lot, and it's all kind of grains of salt right now. All right, next question will come from Jax Fleck. Is Loudermilk still on his rookie deal? He is still on his rookie contract. Jonathan says, how do you feel about the slot corner at this point? Not good. Don't see a lot of, there's no obvious name right now. You have Bishop, but still undrafted rookie free agent. You have potentially Averett, and then some future guys, Josiah Scott, maybe Thomas Graham. Some others could be in the mix, but there really is not that guy. They have just not done a great job replacing Mike Hilton long term. We've talked about that before. They tried to piecemeal it with, rundown options and then pass down options. Last year, Sullivan, Peterson, they obviously didn't draft anybody in terms of slot capable. Watts is going to be an outside corner, if not a safety. So they've not really been able to find that suitable replacement, and it's really kind of led to some issues. You might think back to, 2022, Minka playing slot corner, and that didn't work well. It's been pretty messy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch it play out from here on out the rest of the summer.
All right, next question. What happened to Trey Norwood? He's with the Bills, I think, for a brief time, but he's basically, to my knowledge, fallen out of the NFL. Trey Norwood has, which he had a good start to camp last year, got hurt, got cut, and just tough times from there. Jared says, what's the outlook for Hot Rod, Rodney Williams with all the names in the tight end room? Also, the depot dive has been a real treat. Tyler Vaughn's was mentioned. Not a needle mover, but is there a chance? A couple of questions and comments. Yeah, the depot dive from Ross McCorkle and Joe Clark every Thursday has been excellent and really well received. Thank you for that, Jared. Dave, first question. Hot Rod, Rodney Williams, your guy. You're a Rodney Williams fan. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, look, I don't think you can rule him out. I was one of the ones last year around cut time. Didn't I originally? I had him on my.
You did.
53, I think. And what ended up being the path for him?
He was practice squad to begin the year and then got the call up.
Right. Look. Danny Smith knows who he is, and as long as he stays in good favor with Danny Smith, you got to think Hot Rod has at least a fighting chance in this thing. And I thought as in the limited opportunities that he was asked to block, thought we saw some a little bit better out of him there. I'm not saying he's a lock to make the roster, no, but I don't think you can just sit here in May and say, there's no way he's going to make it.
Sure. The good news is with the Arthur Smith signing, there's an increased chance they will carry 4 tight ends. Typically, they've only carried 3 on their 53. With receiver depth, being pretty muddied and not strong overall. You like the odds of them keeping 4. The downside of the Arthur Smith hire was he brings in one of his guys in Michael Pruitt, and could he get the hat over Williams? Pruitt's the better blocker. Maybe we'll get some fullback work. Williams, a good special teamer, a good athlete, and yeah, for basically a former receiver in college, he blocked a little bit last year. So those guys will battle it out. I like the strength of the room overall. Good competition at the bottom with him, with Pruitt, with Connor Hayward, and we'll see what Darnell Washington can do in year 2. So he's got a shot. They will keep 4. It may come down to Williams versus Pruitt. Next question comes from, if I scroll back up and find it here. Let's see. Mike's still concerned about Herbig's size. Mike's sticking point, he's made the comment to me on Twitter too about Herbig being somewhat smaller than some of these big right tackles that are in the AFC North specifically. Talk about Dawan Jones in Cleveland potentially, Trent Brown or Marius Mims in Cincinnati, Falele from Baltimore potentially. Does the lack of size comparatively with Herbig concern you?
Look, he's got to make that second-year jump, and part of that will be going up against these mammoth guys like that. And, will he be able to? Look, he's got the athleticism to win edges and all like that. But I mean, if one thing stuck out, you go back to what was it, that Wisconsin versus Ohio State tape, right? Yeah,
that was against day one, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think Herbig has always been at a size disadvantage throughout his life, and obviously the NFL is a different ball of wax, but I think Herbig's always had that success, and he had success last year despite every tackle being longer and bigger and twice the size essentially. So I'm just, based on what he did last year, and again, the sample size was small, the volume was lower, and if you extrapolate that over a larger percentage of snaps, you're not going to see the pressure rate that he had, which was, I think, even better than TJ Watt's last year. That's not going to probably continue long-term, but I'm not really concerned about the lack of size right now. I think he proved he can overcome that based on his rookie season.
Yeah, but within that, it is year 2 for him, and he'll be expected to take that next jump, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, probably number 3 outside linebacker, more snaps, more volume, and certainly he will have to do that, show that he can do more than just 10 snaps a game, and when you're coming in with fresh legs, those things help. So there are things to look for, but I don't think the size of the right tackles in the AFC North is going to concern me or change my outlook or plan with Nick Herbig. Kenny D is really adamant that he thinks Roman Wilson is the number 2 receiver for this team, which at this point, what other options are there? What other better options are there? Now he says Wilson is faster than Ayuk, than Samuels, than Sutton. Speed is not really the concern with me with Wilson being an outside guy. It's lack of reps, it's size, it's strength, it's technique, working on releases, staying low as he talked about. So I'm not questioning his speed. I'm kind of questioning the other elements of playing outside, especially that X receiver spot.
Right. He's got a lot to prove when it comes to playing on the outside. Not that he can't do it. We just got to see more tape on it.
Yeah, he's just not. And again, small guys can win on the outside. He's Deontae Johnson, a similar frame guy. He won on the outside, was a very good X receiver. AB the same, but those guys were X outside types. in college, more experienced. They used to be in backside X, 3x1. They're facing press to work in their releases more. Wilson was able to play free a lot because Michigan was schemed well. They were coached well and just a really good offense. So I'm not saying he can't do it. And he certainly will get some outside snaps this year. No question. He will get outside snaps. But ideally, and he was viewed as a slot receiver for the reasons that I mentioned of the lack of size and strength and technique. Let's see, Sean, American Rebel, have they talked about whether Payton Wilson will start? Not really we have not discussed it on this live stream. I haven't talked about it much, generally speaking, since the draft pick. What are your year one thoughts on how he will be used? You have Patrick Queen, you have a Landon Roberts. Let's assume that Holcomb is not in the mix to begin the year, still rehabbing from that terrible knee injury. What role do you think Wilson could have?
I think it's easy to fathom him getting on the field for some percentage of snaps, even if he's behind, obviously guys like Queen and Landon Roberts. I mean, it's going to be hard to upset Roberts, obviously, because of his experience, because of his ability to play downhill and all like that. But could you get into situations where you can carve out some snaps for Wilson somehow, some way? I think that's plausible.
It is, but any idea? I mean, because Queen's going to be your every down guy,
right?
Base, 3-4, nickel and dime.
It's tough to do it. I mean, it would probably be, I don't know, some situations where past situations,
Yeah, I think rotational
nickel. Where he gives you something that in coverage that you don't get from the other veteran there.
Yeah, I think you just might, because they ran a 3-man rotation last year, so Roberts is used to coming on and off the field, so that won't be new to him. I mean, I think Roberts will be in base because he's your hammer, he's your, plays to run, as you said, very well, and again, Queen will be in every snap, all situations kind of guy. That leaves you with nickel work maybe every third series when they go into nickel that Wilson comes in, it's Wilson and Queen, and Roberts is on the sideline. They might try to, slowly integrate him that way, kind of like Porter Jr. last year, where they gave Porter a specific section of snaps in dime. He came in to kind of ease things in. Wilson, again, not playing in dime, but he'll play some nickel rep snaps, and that'll kind of be the way he starts to evaluate and get him on the field and grow from there. So that's my thought of it. But you get into camp, you see how he does. He's got a lot to prove here, and you take it from there.
I think he's not going to have any issue with grasping the what to do aspect of it. I think it would behoove them. Look, the tape shows that they moved him around all over in that defense at NC State. It would behoove him to, obviously get more work, in between the tackles, right?
Sure.
That way there, because he was asked to rush the passer a lot at NC State. Man, they put him on the end. They'd flex him out, some very limited, even in coverage and stuff like that. So how he, and I don't think it would be a bad thing to give him as much work as possible between the tackles, if you will, and see how he functions that way. And I think he the biggest question about him is what everybody talks about. That's the health. If he stays healthy, this is a guy that can chase anybody down on the football field, period.
Sure. That 4.43 speed translates every bit to game tape. His game speed and time speed are identical, and that's exciting. And that kind of answers Simon Winstanley's question too about how much first team work he'll see and what his role will be. So hopefully that answered your question as well. Pie Guy says, who's in the mix for slot cornerback? Again, we'll get better eyes. Really, we'll learn more in OTAs when the whole team comes together. We'll get eyes on it in training camp. But some of the names we mentioned earlier, Beanie Bishop, maybe Anthony Averett, I think he will be, and then Josiah Scott, maybe Thomas Graham. He's kind of versatile guy coming out of Oregon. Maybe there's another name that's in there. Barku's more of an outside guy. I think Barnes has been more of an outside guy. We'll have to kind of wait and see and hear more once they get together in spring ball. Mike Adesso, thoughts on Dulac's reporting? The Steelers want to sign Najee to an extension. Do you think it'll happen, and when? What would it look like? It's hard to say. Historically, guys that get their fifth-year option declined don't receive extensions in the same offseason. It has happened, but it's always come in under that option amount. I don't see Najee taking less, on a long-term deal, multi-year deal for less than what the fifth-year option was, which was $6.79 million. It would have to come in, I think, above that for Najee to want to do it. I'm going to assume he'll play out this year and they'll revisit things next offseason. That's my course until notified otherwise.
I'll be surprised if they get an extension this offseason with him, because a lot of what you just said too, and they have to know that he's looking for a deal at least what his fifth-year option would have averaged had they picked that up. And if they had serious considerations, I think of extending him, they would have thought nothing of picking up that fifth-year option, just using that as a starting point negotiation-wise. Now, once again, you could look at it as maybe are they trying to get it, trying to remove to get around the precedent of, well, look, had we picked up his fifth-year option, then precedent says we don't extend him until next offseason because we don't, you don't, if you're not a quarterback, you don't get extended with 2 years left on your deal. Could that be some sort of angle that way? I mean, we'll see. My gut from the moment that, and look, I was a bit surprised they didn't pick up that fifth-year option, to be honest with you. But my gut since that decision was made is that there won't be an extension this offseason with him.
I'm very curious to just at least hear what Mike Tomlin, and maybe if we hear from Omar Khan in the summer during one of those preseason games, maybe what they say about why they declined the Harris option. I just want to hear what their rationale publicly is.
Right, I agree.
Will we hear from Khan? We'll hear Khan during the serious Friday Night Lights practice. Did they bring on the GM at that time?
Well, usually at some point, doesn't he make some sort of rounds anyway as far as training camp? But I mean, in general, I think we're almost guaranteed every year when Sirius shows up at training camp for Friday Night Lights, we hear from Tomlin, right, Art Rooney II, Omar Khan, and like 5 or 6 other players on top of it there. So I mean, we're not done hearing from Khan. Okay. It's just it's just a matter of when the next time will be, I guess.
Sure. But I'm very curious to hear their answers and curious to hear what Najee Harris's own response is to knowing that has been declined.
Omar's gotten good about dancing around those questions anyway, so I don't think we're going to garner a lot from when and if he is asked about it.
But this one I think would be a tougher question to answer. There's you're in kind of the pressure cooker more with this question because you've talked up how much you like Najee and then you decline his option. It says something about what you think of him, I would assume. I want to see what the response is. Anyway, Simon says that's funny to say. Simon says top positional needs except wide receiver now that they've signed Averett. Sorry if you already spoke about this. I mean, to me, it really is receiver and still slot corner because Averett, I think will get work in the slot, but he has been an outside guy. He has not been traditionally a slot corner in his career. Again, I think they will try to move him around some, but slot corner. Besides that, what other needs? Anything else that comes to mind, Dave?
I mean, watching the back end of that outside linebacker depth chart, maybe.
Safety? Do you love the whole safety group?
Obviously, you're not going to rely on Miles Killebrew is going to be listed as safety, but it's not something that you want to rely on. So, is there a quote unquote, fourth one that maybe you could do something there with? I don't know. That's first world problems, I think, the way this roster's built right now, Yeah,
and I wouldn't call those needs, just areas of depth you may want to try to shore up a little bit. In terms of need, I would still say slot corner is one. I think you should still add there, and it probably will be an ex-Steeler. Patrick Peterson on a podcast, the way he talked seemed to indicate he didn't expect to come back to Pittsburgh. I don't know if I'm interpreting that too heavily or not. Obviously, Cam Sutton, we'll see what the legal situation is, and if we get more clarification. Not somebody you have to go sign today because he knows your system and your playbook. You can go sign before camp and be good to go for week 1. But I would call receiver and slot corner needs.
Amen.
And a quick aside here, he's not visiting Pittsburgh, but I just Marquez Valdez-Scantling in Buffalo tonight meeting with the Bills. So the free agent receiver group, which has already been pretty thin, may get one thinner by tomorrow.
Okay.
All right, a couple minutes left. We'll try to go through these questions a bit quicker. Rob Lightfoot, if I was Broderick, I would not get too comfortable. Jones is seeing Steelers looking at Fa'utanu in the right tackle slot. He knows that he couldn't beat Moore out for the left tackle slot. Maybe Jones will be TOMO. What does TOMO mean? I don't know,
Oh
but
Lord,
basically he's saying Jones might be in trouble. Jones is going to start this year. It's just a question of left tackle or right tackle.
Yeah.
I have no concerns there.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I would be shocked if Broderick Jones is not a week 1 starter on one of the 2 spots.
Mike Odessa's hot take is Rodney Williams and Pruitt make the 53 over Connor Hayward. Thoughts? Got to figure out a way to get Hot Rod on the 53. I mean, no, I wouldn't call Hayward, I wouldn't write his name in pen. We'll see how much fullback work he gets. Those guys all have to compete, and it'll be it won't be talked about much, but the tight end battles will be actually really fun this summer.
I'll be pretty surprised if Connor Hayward's not on the 53.
I mean, I think I certainly would include him on your roster for making it. I did for mine, but I wouldn't guarantee it necessarily. I mean, he is a bit of an awkward fit as a tight end that's not really a tight end.
Okay.
We'll see. I just don't want to. I mean, because you do have Pruitt, who's bigger and a blocker, and
you're a bigger Pruitt fan than I am.
As a blocker, I liked his blocking more than you liked his blocking. And I mean, again, I don't know if he'll make it. If he does, it's probably number 4 tight end. But my point is, you just go into camp and you kind of see what those guys can do in this offense and take it from there. Let's see what else do we have here. Trying to see.
Someone
Roger
asked about compensatory pick there. Would not re-signing Daniels next year earn us a compensatory pick? Look, if they don't, if James Daniels walked next off season in free agency, then you would not get credit for that until 2026 draft.
And that's and
that's assuming the value. Depends what else happens there on the balance sheet and all like that. So a little early to maybe let's see what they do with him this offseason the rest of the way, see if he gets an extension or something like that.
But if he does play well and if he does sign somewhere else, again, given how red hot the market got for guards this year, he would probably offer back 3rd or 4th round comp pick value. And then whether or not you get the pick will be determined by what moves Pittsburgh does or does not make in their portion of free agency.
Look, I haven't looked at the list, but you'd have to think that if he's allowed, assuming he has a season that you think he can have and at his age and all like that, you have to think he'd be one of the hot commodities in the guard market.
Yeah, still be 27, still young, good, in his prime, so would get paid well. Let's see what else we have here. Roger Ritchie, hi guys, from the Bahamas. Doesn't it seem character was a really high criteria for this year's draft? Yeah, I mean it was kind of the old Colbert, Harts, and Smarts. They wanted guys that were experienced. It was an older class overall. Kind of lent itself to taking guys with more experience. But, I mean, character to me has really always been on their list. They've not really drafted a lot of poor character guys in several years. Kind of go back to maybe Martavis and Mike Adams-ish. I mean, those weren't even like screaming red flags. Rarely did they ever take a guy that has like serious, just giant character red flags. So I think it's still generally what they've done, but I think, this year it's squeaky clean, just professionals. And when you draft a bunch of offensive linemen, you're typically getting a lot of high character guys. There aren't a ton of low character offensive linemen out there.
Right.
But certainly I would agree with the sentiment there, Roger. Simon K., are we lacking a true swing tackle to come off the bench if needed? That's an interesting question. There might be some validity to that, but it just depends on who's starting and who's the backup.
Right, and it depends. If you buy into them saying that Dan Moore can't play right tackle, then where people play depends on who goes down.
Yeah, I mean, I could see something where hypothetically, let's say that Broderick Jones starts at left tackle and Troy Fautanu is at right tackle. If Fautanu were to go down, I could see Jones going back to right tackle and then Moore going into left tackle. I think that's a very plausible scenario.
I agree.
And then Mike mentioning as well, I was going to jump to it there. Dylan Cook could be a swing guy if he has a good year. I was high on Cook. He had a really good summer last year, made the 53 because of it. It's a big year too in Pittsburgh for him, but that's a potential swing guy as well. And I think Moore will get snaps at right tackle. I mean, he's not comfortable, but he never played right tackle. Of course, he's not that comfortable there right now. If he gets a whole offseason from OTAs, getting some work there, he may settle in and be a little more comfortable.
It's going to be interesting to watch, as you stated, Dylan Cook's development this offseason. Obviously, Spencer Anderson, what's going to happen with him this summer, get to see more of him. Those are two guys that hopefully can continue to progress this summer.
Couple quick questions and answers we'll get to. Russ Obenstein, do you guys think Beanie has a good shot at making the roster? Yeah, as good a shot as any undrafted free agent this team signed, which was a small pool of names, but just given his talent and the team's interest and the hole at slot corner, he's got a shot.
Especially when you look at the rest of the roster right now, you gotta like his chances, at least where things sit right at this moment.
John Pennington, why didn't this team address the D-line depth more? It's a fair critique. They couldn't address everything with all their picks. They wanted to go all in on O-line. The D-line run happened pretty early on day 2. I get it. There still is no heir to Cam Hayward, but they weren't going to be able to fill everything as much as they would have liked to.
Yeah, you only had so many holes and so many pegs to go around, and we kind of talked about that ahead of the draft. What was going to kind of be the odd position out of in the first 4 rounds, so to speak.
Yeah, and it was D-line and slot corner were the ones that were left in the cold, and they drafted D-line, didn't even draft slot corner. David Kapoor, Deontae lost the worst thing about the offseason. I would say so. Still not happy with that trade. I know some people were very happy to see Deontae leave. He was not irreplaceable, but based on the lack of replacement for him, I think it's probably the worst outcome of this offseason.
Let's see what transpires between now and week 1, and then we'll better be able to answer that question long view.
Ben, Connor Hayward returning kicks. He's great with the ball in his hands. He was a running back in Michigan State, returned a couple of kicks. Could he get some looks back there? Opposite of Patterson, you will need 2 returners. Patterson is your main guy, but you need a second one. I think teams will have a lot of trial and error and just try to mess around with stuff in camp, preseason, with this kind of radical rule change. Pittsburgh has had big guys return kicks before. Terrell Watson, Najee Davenport, Gary Russell. It wouldn't shock me if they gave him a look at least.
You left out Toussaint, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, Toussaint did some kick returns, too.
Yeah.
That'll average 17.3 yards per return, that kind of stuff. 007, do you think Steeler fans are enamored with big-name receivers, knowing that the Steelers always find gems in the draft and free agency, i.e. AB in the 6th round? I don't. I just think they want when it's fun to think about getting an Ayuk and that big name that typically has not been Pittsburgh's MO in terms of draft or trading for that star type player. So it's just kind of fun to think about that in a quiet otherwise off season.
Right. Especially after trading away a guy like Deontae.
Yeah,
and I know you get mixed. You say that, and half the people say, "Well, good riddance," and the other half say, "Well, they shouldn't have traded him." But
right.
I see both sides of it. But it is going to be interesting to watch the rest. The rest of that depth chart fill out.
Mm-hmm.
From this point forward, based on who they've signed so far this offseason and obviously who they drafted.
And Pittsburgh has found gems, but it's still hard to bank on late-round guys like AB, finding the next AB. And when you had, I think Pittsburgh always made this point, when you had Ben throwing to them, it helped make the receivers look a bit better in his prime type Ben. Now, your quarterback plays better this year than last year. There's no question about that, which will help. But I just don't want to assume that mid to late-round receiver becomes that next star-type player. All right, what else do we have here? Dave, any updates on the cash situation? You just kind of give us a real quick cash review.
It really hasn't changed much other than some signing bonuses from these undrafted guys. Look, we already had kind of budgeted in what the draft picks were going to be, and the undrafted guys aren't going to move that needle. It'll be interesting to see if the bonuses even exceed $75,000 for these 5 players, and $35,000 of it went to Plumlee. $5,000 went to the international player.
Well,
so you got Welshoff. So you got $40,000 there, and you've got waiting to hear what the other 3 signing bonuses are on the undrafted guys. They're not going to be earth-shattering. Might even have that by first thing in the morning, because those should be coming in on the NFLPA. But look, they've when you try to budget this out based on what you think might happen, which is dangerous to do in year 1 of a 3-year cycle, it says there's cash that can be that should be able to be spent moving forward here. And I try to take a conservative look at it. So I mean they're fine. They're absolutely fine from both a cap and a cash situation. The only real question is how much more additional cash will they spend, and that assumes something like a Freiermuth extension happens, later on this summer and all like that. So I mean, there's no worries there. It's just sitting and watching to see if they will spend another $13 to $26 million in actual cash this offseason.
Mike Adesso with a question and a comment. If Hayward and Patterson are back there, no team would kick even remotely close to Patterson. That's like a free play. Point taken, but that's still my concern about Patterson no matter who they put back there opposite. Because whether it's him or Quez Watkins, I mean, Patterson is the guy you don't want to touch the ball, the all-time leader in NFL kick return touchdowns, third all-time in average. So, could teams just kick away from Patterson the entire year? I would. So, I think it is a concern and a downside to signing him because you have to have two guys back there now.
Uh-huh.
And then he also says, what is Spencer Anderson's future role, interior only or all five spots? I mean, all five might be pushing. I don't know if he did much left tackle in camp last year. I'm trying to think back.
There was one position that he, what was it?
It had been left tackle. Because I know he played right tackle. He played center. He had to have played both guard spots.
Right. I don't remember off the top of my head, but we had tracked it that he had moved around quite a bit, as did Dylan Cook too,
Yeah, he did. Cook played both tackle spots and some left guard. I'll have to go back and check my notes on that. He might have done even all five in camp. I think he did maybe 4 of the 5 in the 3 preseason games. I think his versatility will always be his calling card. It'll be like a BJ Finney, Trey Essex kind of thing where he'll be a top backup in a couple different spots or a guy that can, plug in wherever you have to have that guy plug in. So that's probably his role as swing guy of some sort. And finally, Alex and Davis comes from Randy Wagner. Any impression of John Rice Plumlee so far? Again, we were not at rookie minicamp, so we did not get a chance to view him and evaluate him. I would just say, based off his college tape, he has to be more accurate, has to be more consistently accurate. That was his number one flaw. Why I thought he might go to receiver for whatever team had picked him up. He was a receiver briefly at Ole Miss earlier in his career, a tremendous athlete overall. So accuracy will be the thing to watch with him come training camp.
All right. You've watched more than him than I have.
All right, we're going to wrap things up. Appreciate you guys being here. Good turnout tonight. Thank you for all the super chats and the questions. We'll be back in 2 weeks and see where this team is at as they will be embarking on their OTAs by that point. So, Dave, as always, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you for putting us on, and always a good group that we have show up for these things. So we appreciate everybody and the great questions, and please support the Depot Dive, those guys over there, and just appreciate all of you. Can't say that enough. Peace and love, everybody.
There'll be an archive version of this on Steelers Depot in just a little bit, also on the site, and check out the site for a lot of content, original, whatever news of the day there might be, and we'll have on the channel probably a video on Ryan Watts coming up next day or two, so watch out for that as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you guys listening, and we will talk to you soon.